we said this is a culture change, right? And that means that adoption, innovation, and exploration of these tools cannot be mandated. It must be inspired. These are not go use the tool, darn it.
Welcome to This is Digital, a podcast brought to you by West Monroe. Join us as we talk to leading experts about bringing the digital mindset to your organization.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to This is Digital, a podcast where we break down the latest digital trends and share tips on how you and your company can be more digital. My name is Christina Galuzis, and I'm the Director of Communications and Public Relations at West Monroe. I'm super excited to be hosting one of our Season 4 episodes. For those of you that don't know me, I've been at West Monroe for over 7 years, and I'm actually one of the original creators of this podcast. I've had a ton of fun helping this podcast grow and thrive in the background. I am a curious question asker, and perhaps that comes from my background in journalism. Today's episode is all about generative AI in the workplace, a topic that people just cannot seem to get enough of. And we're going to answer some big questions today. Number one, a question that may be on your mind. How do I get employees to be unafraid of AI experimentation? Number two, how do I get them to actually do it and do it with the tools provided by your company? And number three, what is the secret to successful generative AI adoption among a workforce? As an original member of West Monroe's AI Center of Excellence, today's episode is one I'm super familiar with and excited to be talking about with my colleagues from the AI Center of Excellence. They are EJ and Sam Vogel. EJ, who you can also catch on This is AI, a mini series that we did as an offshoot of This is Digital. EJ's background is in product strategy and engineering, and Sam's background is in software engineering and data science. The two of these gentlemen are both very critical to driving AI strategy forward for our clients, as well as at West Monroe. Let's get started.
Well, thank you so much, Christina. Really appreciate it. I am also excited to talk about this topic as well, something near and dear to my heart as we talk about AI adoption and enabling ourselves and our clients and those folks out in the world that are trying to take advantage of AI to really understand the art of the possible and how to implement.
Yeah, thank you, Christina. Excited to be here as well and talk through what we've been doing here at West Monroe and how companies can ensure adoption is successful.
Sam, I know that we have found both in clients and also within West Monroe some employees, that are afraid or feel threatened by AI, and may not see it as sort of a partner in their work. They don't see it as, say, a partner. They see it as a replacement, right? Or a threat. So talk to me a little bit about how employees can shift that mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of it comes with repeated use of the tool, just understanding its different capabilities, as those aspects of how it can help. And as you use the tool, the areas that it falls short, at least today. So it kind of highlights, where's the good work that I'm putting in that's not available out of a, LLM, what isn't replaceable. And that's kind of the bottom up approach, right? Of employees actually kind of engaging with it and learning more about it. But even from a top down perspective, companies can be, showing where are the use cases that it is augmenting work. It's not necessarily replacing work, and really kind of prove those scenarios out.
Yeah, I'd love to add on to that as well. I think it as Sam was saying, it's really that help me understand that this isn't a drop-in replacement for me. AI EJ isn't going to replace EJ, but EJ using AI effectively and learning and understanding how to integrate it into my work will absolutely boost my productivity and allow me to focus on the things that I'm more interested in. That's a really critical mind shift that I think you're highlighting, Sam, where people can understand this isn't like learning a workflow in Salesforce that's required, or implementing some other sort of like pipeline management strategy in a BD tool. This is actually something that I can tailor to my day-to-day delivery to help me be more effective and focus on the things that I'm more interested in focusing on anyway.
100%. And I would say even on the marketing side, right? I could all day long give, Nigel or ChatGPT a recent piece of thought leadership, even a podcast episode, and have it write social posts across the 4 different channels and say, write us a social post, right? For these 4 different channels. I guarantee you it's going to give me rocket ships as emojis, which super unnecessary, such a tell. But, or I could give it that direction, right? You've got that human element and that strategy where I get to have fun and say, hey, here's this piece, right, that we did, or here's this podcast episode, here's this thought leadership. I really want you to focus on this aspect, or the audience is really facing this issue, and I want you to focus your social post on empathizing or addressing this issue with them head on, right? You still get to do your job, right? And even get to do something fun and likely even better. I'm just not sitting and typing out the thing, 4 different ways and 15 different times. I completely agree. It's all about bringing a new level of satisfaction to employees on their jobs and letting them focus on the things that they love about, their skills and what they're good at, which, brings me to another question. There's so many different AI tools out there, and employees are bringing them to work, right? And so we've actually been using this term BYO AI, right? That's really resonated, I think, with a lot of people out there. And they might even be keeping it a secret from their employers, right? Why is that a problem for companies? EJ, I'll start with you.
Yeah, that's a great question. So that is absolutely happening. I think there's a lot of folks that don't just leave AI at home to help out with brainstorming a vacation or, coming up with a meal plan for the week. There's plenty that are bringing it to work and using that in their day-to-day productivity. And the reason why that can be an issue is sort of twofold. The first is data privacy and security. So you have to understand that some of these tools will take all the information you put in them and use that to retrain or improve the functionality of that particular tool into the future. And that means that any kind of data that you might bring from your company that is proprietary or private could be included in future training data. So it's important to understand data usage and data governance in these tools. And the second reason is it makes it difficult to understand how we're positively impacting productivity across an organization. There's really great opportunities for someone to come up with a great idea on how to leverage AI and scale that across a small team or a whole department or an entire vertical in a business. And then a lot of people get the benefit from that same sort of productivity enhancement or improvement in output quality. So it's important to be able to share these tools and techniques with others around the firm to help everybody take advantage of those solutions.
Yeah. So tell me a little about, okay. So it sounds like, it's a little scary. Company data could really be at risk if employees are using their own sort of personal tools, right? And so, how do companies create a safe space for experimentation, and how, give me a level of importance that you would put on that experimentation with AI, right? Because it sounds like it's already happening. And so what is that sort of, how fast should companies get to giving their employees that kind of space to do so in order to make sure that their company data is safe?
I'd say yesterday, that's how fast they should be trying to give their employees the sandbox environments or secure places to test and learn. But ASAP, there's a lot of solutions out there. There's custom solutions that companies like ours and others can deploy. There's SaaS providers that have, data compliant and privacy compliant solutions and capabilities. But I would say the most important thing is getting something in the hands of your employees to at least allow for the basic productivity enhancement use cases. The classic one would be like note summarization or action item identification coming out of meetings. That's pretty ubiquitous across most businesses. But it's important for these employees to also be trained on how to use these tools so they can start experimenting and trying to identify new areas of impact or new opportunities to create value in their organizations and surface that up throughout the organization so that there's an organic creation of value leveraging AI tools. But that can only happen if they have the time, the training, and the opportunity to play around with these solutions in a safe, secure place.
Right. So, I think what you're describing is that sort of, the sanctioned place, that sanctioned environment, but I think it sounds like employees are bringing this to organizations. And, what we've talked about, of course, as an AI COE is there's both that top-down approach, right? But then there's also the bottom-up approach needed for successful generative AI adoption. So, Sam, I'm wondering if you can sort of talk about why the employee perspective and feedback are crucial, in that bottom-up approach in order to meet that top-down approach that you just talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest reason is that the employees that are going to see the biggest benefit are the ones that are doing the work today. It's a lot easier for them to go in and be able to kind of brainstorm with the understanding of how they get work done day in and day out, and then apply a new tool and come up with the more interesting use cases, the more efficiency driving use cases. They're going to be better at getting rid of the work that is slow and boring. Just in general, they're going to have the best perspective in terms of what is the proper way to be using these tools to gain the best value. But I think one of the other pieces that's important, kind of in between the top down and bottom up, in our article, we talked a little bit about the middle manager as well. And it's a really awesome perspective to have these middle managers trained because they also, first of all, they have plenty of tasks that are ripe for use for generative AI. One of my favorite examples is running a daily Scrum meeting. You can throw in some transcripts afterwards and you get a list of what everybody did yesterday, what everybody's doing tomorrow. You can have action items. You can have it be pulling out ways that certain team members can be collaborating or tasks, things like that. So the middle manager is able to come up with those use cases themselves. And then they're also able to have a little bit better grasp in terms of mentoring others on how to use the tool. So they're kind of the key to having those two approaches come together.
Yeah, I personally would agree. I think just to talk for a second about, what we do in West Monroe in marketing, we actually have a monthly meeting where we all come together, and I just introduced a sort of AI corner where it's less, here's how to use AI in everybody's role or in marketing, or here are all these best practices. And it's truly just a share your screen, show something you did recently with an AI tool that we have at our disposal at West Monroe, and show the rest of the team how you did it and what you did to get other people thinking about how they could adopt that, save that prompt or use it differently for what they're doing and thinking about. And it's been a really fun way to kind of see how other people think about it. Just like any other kind of craft, right? You share oh, I wrote in this way, or I wrote an email in this way, or I did an advertising strategy in this way, and you learn from your peers. And it's really that same way with generative AI. And the more that we share those things, right, broadly, and facilitate as middle managers, if you will, the sharing of that information, I think the faster people will probably get comfortable with it, and not only will they get more comfortable with it, they will, they're going to start using it more on their own, and they're going to do it the way that their friend did it, and just get faster and better at their job.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think there's a couple of critical points in there that are implicit into sort of what you're talking about, Sam, and what you just brought up, Christina. And that's, there's certainly strategic alignment and a push for experimentation, but also there's this trust and mentorship that is fostered throughout the organization that makes it safe for me to have an idea, to try it out. Maybe it's awesome and we scale it out to the rest of the firm. Maybe it's not awesome, but everybody learns what worked and what didn't work, and we can all move forward together. And there's no punitive measure against trying something out, in this new and emerging space. So I think that's sort of an implicit contract from a cultural change perspective, is that trust and mentorship that is facilitated through that sort of bottoms up and top down cross collaboration.
Yeah, it's a unique opportunity with generative AI, because often one of the first hurdles faced with new software, with new technology, is adoption. And that's where top down is important, because there's, sometimes it goes as far as mandates on how to use and that sort of stuff. And the reality, as we talked about in the first question, is people are using this, and the people that aren't using it are the ones that just haven't kind of seen some of those socialized use cases. So from a top down perspective, you still got to put up guardrails, you still got to give guidelines, you got to encourage and really promote the sharing. But to some extent, you can kind of get out of the way a little bit, get the tools in front of the users. And it's, that hurdle is knocked down already for adoption. People are going to be excited to jump in and use it.
Right. And I think, we're talking a lot about how there are employees that are bringing it to work and almost hiding it, right? But then there are other employees who don't want to touch it. And so it sounds like there's, it's just so across the board, right? And then we've got executives who want everybody to be using it the same way and the same tool. And so, tell me a little bit about that, right? Is it possible to get everybody kind of using the same tool at the same amount at the same time? Or is this going to be a little bit more of an uneven adoption, and for how long? EJ, I'll throw that question to you.
Yeah, that's a great one. Nope, everybody's going to use it to the same expertise level always right away. I'm just kidding. I think what we're seeing is that there is a balance of time spent certainly in like training or learning and development to understand what this technology does, the tools and the capabilities, and then also my own personal practice of how to integrate this capability or these tools into my day-to-day workflow. The more time that we see people spending on those first two, there's an exponential adoption rate. We actually looked at a lot of metrics internally at West Monroe recently around the correlation between the people who spend time playing with, experimenting, and testing AI tools, and the amount of work that we're able to sell and or optimize using these tools. And it's strong. It is a strong correlation. It's true that there are people who are kind of stuck in, the hectic cycle of just work delivery right now, and they don't really have the time and space for experimentation. So we're seeing that as the lower end of the adoption spectrum. So I think it's important for us as an organization, our leaders and our to both your points, our middle managers, to be fluent in these tools and capabilities so they can help make the space for our employees to have time to become fluent and identify how they can integrate these tools into their day-to-day work, because that is the first step towards ideation, that's the first step towards optimization, and that's the first step towards innovation in an organization.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, so you're talking about internal adoption here at West Monroe, which is a direction I would love to take this conversation. And Sam, let's go to you on this. We introduced our own internal generative AI platform. We kind of, took our own advice, make sure that people had a sandbox to play in that was, safe, secure for client data, for West Monroe data. We named it Nigel, for what it's worth. That is based off of NGL, which, because West Monroe's mission is to build the next generation of leaders. And Nigel is a next generation leader. He's a next generation LLM, if you will.
Well done.
Thank you. Whoever named Nigel was just so brilliant, I have to say.
Cough, Christina.
Yes. So it maybe have been me. No, I think, so Sam, Let's talk about that, because EJ was just talking about that, getting metrics and data on correlation with, adoption and what that leads to. But talk a little bit more about our own experience working in this software. How did we approach our own adoption? How do we incorporate employee feedback into Nigel? Tell us a little bit about those sort of early days and where we are today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's been just about a year since we launched. I don't remember the exact date, but it is right around this time. So that's exciting. It's been out in the wild here for a year. I think one of the early things we did that was really important, instead of just opening up a chat feature for people, we provided the opportunity for people to make and save prompts, either for their own repeated use or to be able to share them out to others. We were just talking about kind of the democratization of generative AI across people that are happy to jump into new tech versus not. And, we saw a lot of prompt sharing. One of my own experiences was putting together one to help me write my self-reviews. And people told me they overheard me talking about it in the kitchen and then went and used it themselves. And that was their first time ever signing in to Nigel. So definitely, I think that the sharing of those helped the tool spread pretty quickly. Which was amazing. Kind of on that same note, we talked about how people want to jump in. So we kind of let it run on its own. We got the tool out there. We obviously socialized that it was available. We ran a couple of knowledge transfer sessions. But for the most part, it was pretty self-adopted. And I do think that's maybe a place where certainly people that are jumping in now would want to push a little bit harder, get that adoption in earlier. There's a lot more agreed upon good first use cases, general use cases that can really be pushed and socialized early, which help people learn the tool and really dive in there. And then one of the most fun things we did after a couple of months, we started to pull together the usage statistics and we're able to identify our top 20 users. We were able to identify usage across all users, but we pulled it together, our top 20 users, to come in and give feedback on the tool. We had the people we expected that had been engaging with us and using the tool a ton, but our number one user was actually someone we had never met, had used the tool, pulled it up and was using it in their day-to-day work. So it was really
Let's talk
fun.
about that for a minute.
Yeah.
What did we learn from that person? I love that it was somebody that we had never met, didn't expect. Quite frankly, and we don't have to out who that person was, but what level were they? What surprised us about that person? And what did we learn from them?
I don't remember how many specifics you remember, EJ. The things that stood out to me and were surprises were they were not in a technical practice, or at least not technically forward practice. I feel like every aspect of our work these days is tech related. And they were a consultant, an L1, someone kind of just coming in and really using the tool to kind of upskill their work and really, bring together some summarization, some expertise, some drafting, tools like that.
Yeah, absolutely. If I recall correctly, you're spot on, Sam. That was somebody who was using this tool to help level up their game. They were doing the brilliant basics of capturing notes during meetings, documenting action items, putting together recaps and summaries and all this stuff. And they were using Nigel just to improve writing, provide additional context, take a set of bullets, turn it into well-written, thoughts. And the most important thing that they also said is this was just to help them move to the next stage, and then something we advocate for anybody using generative AI, but certainly here at West Monroe, human in the loop. So they would then take that final output and then turn it into a reviewed first draft for their team to react to. So incredibly potent tool set for them to level up their game and also save some time here and there rather than spending hours staring at a blank screen trying to collate your thoughts.
Talk to me a little bit about how you get a broader understanding of your sort of employees' adoption and feedback on generative AI, their thoughts and feelings, and even those employees who aren't using it at all. How do you suggest that people out there sort of get feedback from across the spectrum and then incorporate that into their sort of strategies in terms of to increase adoption and the right kind of adoption.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to take a swing at this. So early on, we learned a few things. And that was a lot of people still treat generative AI tools, especially chat bots in particular, as a proxy for a Google search. And that's not necessarily the case. It really depends on what tool you're using and what its capabilities are. If you're going to, search the web using Gemini or Copilot, sure, you can Google search your prompts. If you're using something that is maybe interfacing with a proprietary data set, like one of our tools internally, or something that's more built for generalized brainstorming or text crafting, text generation, there's a different approach that you use. So what we're doing here is, starting with one of our key business verticals, we rolled out a series of prompt engineering training that help people ground on what exactly this stuff is and what it's good at and what you shouldn't be using it for, and some of the risks that you need to mitigate when using a tool like generative AI. We then had a progressive series of curriculum where we talked about how to craft a prompt. First of all, what a prompt is, how to craft a prompt, how to make them successful, how to integrate into your day-to-day work. And we have some sessions coming in the near future where we're actually going to integrate custom and proprietary data. And that's really the aha moment, because people are not always on board for a history lesson about the past of AI. Some find it interesting, but people are on board for, show me what I can do in my day-to-day that makes a meaningful difference, a meaningful impact on the work that I deliver, and show me how I can do that repeatedly and in a creative and optimized way.
Let's talk about the ROI of generative AI at work and with employees, right? I think for executives, I think there's a ton of question about those benefits, right? The increase in productivity and those types of things. But those qualitative benefits, let's talk about employee engagement and satisfaction for a minute. Are we measuring that for clients? Are clients measuring that? Are we measuring that ourselves? And what level of importance should we place on that side of measurement from generative AI in the workplace?
Yeah, I maybe just something real quick first.
Yeah.
I think it's important to note, kind of going back to the beginning of the pod here. We said this is a culture change, right? And that means that adoption, innovation, and exploration of these tools cannot be mandated. It must be inspired. These are not, go use the tool, darn it, and realize 48.7% increased productivity. This is, I want to help you in your job. This is a great tool that can do this. I need your help working with me to figure out how this can unlock productivity. So I think it's just important to understand the context, because there's a lot of organizations out there that are consulting with companies and saying, if you implement X, Y, and Z, you will get 62.3% productivity. And then there's a big delta a month or two after the consultancy leaves, because there's no inspiration, there's no cultural adoption to really, get people to change the way that they work. But back to kind of that original question of how are we measuring? So we've tried to instrument, Nigel, for example, with a lot of the brilliant basics of product telemetry. We're looking at engagement, we're looking at churn, we're looking at adoption, we're looking at, usage statistics like Sam mentioned earlier. We can kind of slice and dice the data a whole bunch of ways. What we want to start adding is some of that qualitative feedback as well. And that's something that we're doing after this prompt engineering curriculum that we're piloting with one part of the company and then rolling out firm-wide as well, is now let's go get qualitative feedback on how this is improving your day-to-day delivery and execution. Something else that we've also done is we've started an intake process or a pipeline of innovation ideas. So we have people coming from different parts of the company and saying, I think AI could help here. So here's my idea. And we sort of like, have a pitch room, and they pitch the idea. We beat it up, see if it's a right fit for AI, or maybe there's just some standard process automation or something that can help. And if it's a good fit for generative AI, we have an accelerator process that allows us to test it, prove it, and quantify the value. with metrics, whether it's productivity increase or cost reduction or value delivery. We're looking at it from a number of different facets as well. And then my favorite common denominator is we're also looking at all these initiatives with a rubric focused on our, West Monroe's 2024 company goals and strategies. So I always, because I'm a product person at heart, I always say you have to ladder all that stuff up through the organization and make sure that you're on strategy as you work.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting dilemma. I think a little bit more externally when we're selling this work or talking with clients about it. To your point, Christina, the conversations are typically rooted in where is the value, where is the efficiency, what financial gain, if we're paying this amount for a project, what can we expect back? So we do need to root some of those statistics in. We have to create financial models that show that ROI in different ways. But you have to be careful to remind people in those conversations that if you go in with that being the leading message to the people that are going to use the tool, they will actively disengage. And it really can't be the driving force. It needs to be the happy result, right? It has to be, we're trying to make your job better. You already have to do this type of work. Here's ways that we think it will effectively change the day-to-day work that you do. And we want to work with you, the users, to make sure it's fitting and working correctly. And at the end of the day, then you want to be able to kind of pull back and say, okay, are we seeing some of those return on investments that we expected out of it? And if not, it can't be necessarily a fail. You have to think of it either as a failure of adoption as well as a failure of the tool itself. It can't just be one dimensional when you're thinking about implementing these pieces of technology.
I want to stay on this for just one more minute, because I think this is the whole point of this entire episode, right? Is what you just said, where you can go into it with that end result in mind, but if you communicate that that's the end result in mind, you won't make it, right? Because you lose the people, and it's not inspiring, to your point, EJ. Mm-hmm. So you have to back up and inspire the people to get there. When we go out and talk to clients about this, how many of them, A, get that from the outset, or B, come back to us and say, okay, I get it now, right? And so I wonder, from our perspective in working with clients on this over the last, 12 to 18 months, how many have kind of come to see that is the case?
Well, I just was going to share one huge success story on that particular topic, Christina, which, to your point, we'd hope people would see this from the outset. But one of the implementations we did at a client, their CIO, some of the feedback that he gave when we asked for some marketing feedback was that this was the most high fives he's ever gotten for a product launch before. We didn't pitch that project as you're going to get a lot of high fives, right? That's not how we sold it. And, we're not going to go to market with that approach either, but it is it was really important to that team that they saw real excitement around what they were pushing out there. They saw people coming to them with stories that how it had improved their day to day. And then it really kind of launched them on their AI journey of how are we going to use this tool? How are we going to maybe figure out, okay, this is really cool and people love it. Okay, now we can take a step back and say, these are the things that really need to be automated. These are the areas that are low hanging fruit. But that first step through the door really was generating that excitement. And, I hope to have more and more clients be excited about that prospect from the beginning. I think a lot of people in the room like that idea. You talk to them about some of that feedback. You give them that quote, most high fives I ever gotten, and you typically get people kind of excited to bring this to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, that's one of my favorite quotes. I think I included that in the case study we put together for that particular client. And there was another one that we did shortly after that client, where the counsel that we worked with at the client, we worked with them to identify their initial purpose for engaging here was to underscore their cultural commitment to innovation and exploring the new tools that will change the way that people are working in the future. And then they'll be working with the, particular parts of the organization and the people who do the day-to-day delivery to identify the best use cases for moving forward. And that was the cadence. It was education and signaling of the cultural commitment. And then it was ideation and brainstorming sessions with each of these different groups from the company, and then unlocking a couple of really cool use cases that we prototyped right away. And they've been running with that for, a few months now, and actually just came back to us with an ask for another solution from one of their individual contributors who said, man, I've been working with this tool for a while now, and I have an idea. I think we can make this better, a better onboarding experience for new employees who are trying to understand all this stuff that we do. So that's a great example of grassroots innovation and ideation based on fluency and a commitment to cultural change.
I think it's important to just recognize where people are in that journey as an organization. The initial approach has to have genuine excitement and interest in the human element of using these tools. But there certainly are clients that either, we began that journey with them or we're engaging with them further down the line, and they have very specific use cases they want to accomplish. And so in that case, people are already excited. The use case is probably already thought out, and we can kind of go in with a little bit more of a pointed approach of, here's the specific thing we're trying to solve with the specific model of how that's going to help. Can't lose sight of the excitement and the people engagement aspect of it, but I do think it's important to recognize some companies are past that to some extent.
Right. Well, let's talk about that. I know that we partnered on the thought leadership piece with our colleagues in change management, organizational change management here at West Monroe, because it is such an important part of this process, right? And so let's talk a little bit about how, while that's not necessarily my expertise, your expertise, EJ, or your expertise, Sam, let's talk about how important that is to generative AI adoption. It's really at that intersection of tech and people and process and change and that human aspect of it. And so, how much do we, when we talk about this with clients and even within our own organization, talk about more of those traditional change management processes or approaches when it comes to generative AI? Or are we really bringing a sort of new set of rules with change management? Or are those sort of more traditional approaches working with generative AI?
Yeah, I sort of liken this to, well, let me back up. I think it's a bit new. There's some principles that are tried and true, but I think it's a bit new. There's a difference between leveraging, in some cases that's still bleeding edge technology and generative AI appropriately and mitigating risk and ensuring, strong value delivery. It's not like change management for implementing an ERP or a CRM or something like that, where it's basically get ready for a week of super exciting training to learn how to enter a new deal in your CRM solution, right? And you have a deck with 4,000 pages and step A through step double Z, and it's ridiculous, right? But there's no blueprint for that in generative AI. But some of the tenets are the same. Like you have to understand the technology, you have to understand how it works. There has to be some level of governance around, I think Sam called this out earlier, what data you can use, what data you can't use. There's some controls that need to just live around these solutions from a basic perspective. But then you need to shift the conversation to empowering people to ideate and innovate based on their understanding of how the tool functions. And that has to be promoted from a cultural adoption perspective. A great example, I'm sure by the time this airs, we'll already have announced it, so I'm not speaking out of school, but we're going to be running a contest at West Monroe for people to generate new and cool prompts across the organization. And there's a monetary reward for stuff that actually drives value.
A nice one.
A nice one. This is not a $25 gift certificate to Outback Steakhouse. This is, and if they're sponsoring us, I'm sorry. This is a a nice financial incentive for people to really contribute and like be part of the team that's trying to innovate here. And that requires a bit of a mentality shift from implementing a SaaS platform or implementing, some traditional technology solution. So I would say it's kind of equal parts of baseline, appropriate use, governance, ethical use, et cetera.
Yeah.
And then also a new way of thinking and a new way of potentially working.
I was just going to say, we're seeing this question, I think, in data science projects across the board. We think about these use cases. Another example that comes to mind that we've worked with multiple clients with on, is some employee group that they have interacts heavily with a large document often, and they're often having to search it, having to read through it, having to scroll through it, find the information that they need. They know what that information is. They just need the reference point. And it's, typically these documents are 100 pages long or so. So they usually just have it open on their screen next to them while they're working. Typically they're answering calls or, doing sales, all sorts of different things. In order to get them to use the product the way that you want to maybe realize some of those efficiency gains, you have to think beyond just supplying another tool. It can't just necessarily live like in a new tab on the web browser. If you can integrate it directly into the document itself, that goes quite a long way. Try to meet the user with what they're already doing today, rather than provide like new and different ways for them to interact, unless there's a really compelling reason to do so. But
you mean like contextually integrated, or built into the workflow that I'm trying to execute?
Yeah, I think another example outside of generative AI specifically, but more broadly AI and data science, we often do a lot of work with looking at customer churn models, retention of users. And a company's like, great, we want to know that information so we can keep our customers. But they don't have a team that's working on customer retention at all yet. So it's like, okay, cool, we have a new churn model and it does a good job, but your executive's looking at it, and then they're looking at it in another month and it hasn't changed. And then in 2 months, it still hasn't changed. It's like, well, you need to hire the people that do something about that, right? You need to then give them the systems to approach those customers and those aspects of it. So it does need to be thought through more than just the tool itself. And we're finding a ton of success bringing in OCM for that sort of thing.
Right. Well, so let's kind of bring this all together for our listeners here. And I believe that we've given, a ton of recommendations, just inherently through the discussions that we've had, but let's sort of actually voice them, right? Here in this segment, let's talk about our top recommendations for companies that might be struggling with generative AI adoption. They're either, maybe they have employees that are doing that BYO AI approach, or they've got employees that are really scared of AI and don't want to, have anything to do with it. What are our sort of top recommendations for a successful generative AI adoption, whether it's a top 3 or top 5? I'll start with you, EJ.
Yeah. A couple of things that I would start with is make sure that you have a strategic approach to how you want to get into this space. We encounter a lot of organizations that are deep into AI use case identification or something like that, and they haven't done the basic work to understand the technology and build fluency and adoption of the technology. So, we sometimes look at that as a sort of a crawl, walk, run approach, where crawl is like pick a platform, build a safe place to experiment, start with fluency, start with adoption, then start with adoption with custom data, then move into more complex use cases. And we see a lot of people like skipping to the end, and then they wonder why there's not a lot of strong adoption from the workforce. So I think the strategy must be well thought out to ensure that there's a systematic approach to onboarding people into art of the possible. The second thing I would say is governance. And we were just talking about it, but OCM, like Sam said, you need a set of guidelines and rules for how you manage data. You need a perspective on human in the loop to make sure that you're still delivering strong value based on the expertise of the people that are leveraging these tools. And you need to understand how they integrate with your systems and capabilities. What tool does brainstorming? What tool is a, retrieval augmented generation search tool for documentation? What do I use? When do I use it? And why do I use it? And then I think you need a system of accountability. How are you tracking the value generated? Is that through cost takeout? Is that through optimization? Is that through improved quality of delivery, meaning increased price? Or is that, where are you really focusing the value capture of these investments? So that's probably the first place that I would start. I'd be curious to hear what you think, Sam.
Yeah. I think one of the early things companies should do is provide, I'm trying to think of a word like opposite of restrictive, but basically provide examples of what is appropriate. I think some employees, they're not necessarily afraid of it making them redundant, but they're afraid of, like, is it okay that I used this to summarize a transcript? Is it okay that I'm using this to help write my self-review or to help brainstorm a review for someone else? And the more those questions can be answered proactively from the top-down approach, then the more people are going to be willing to share those examples and really push those innovative uses forward. I had another one that I'm losing my train of thought on, but if I think of it here in a minute, I'll come back to it.
Yeah, that's okay. So what I'm hearing, and like what I heard when we were doing the thought leadership piece, and what I've heard throughout this episode is it's almost this really strong balance of left brain, right brain, right? Go into it with governance, strategy, metrics driven, right? Starting with the end in mind, but then also you cannot forget that inspiration, the entrepreneurialism, the sharing, the human element. And if you match those things up and you marry them really nicely, that is really that recipe for success with generative AI in the workplace.
I think that's spot on.
Yeah, and that reminded me of the one I was going to bring up, which is kind of that second aspect of yours. But one of the examples that I think has led to some of the most collaboration and people learning the tool is coming up with almost fun games or like ways to use the tool. I know early on, EJ, in one of the knowledge transfer sessions we did, we had people just type in like, what role is Sam Bogle at West Monroe? And it, often thinks you're the CEO. It's one of the examples I'd always give to clients to kind of show some of that, when it's making things up, is like, who was the founder of WM, West Monroe? And it answers confidently wrong. And it typically uses those as the initials. So it'd say like Wanda Matthews is the founder of West Monroe. And it was a quick way to kind of show employees that it's like, where are the limitations in a fun manner?
Yes.
And it can really be pretty hilarious what it comes up with sometimes.
Yeah. Yes. One of the things I've always, I think I heard this maybe early last year, but this wave of experimentation with AI and cultural adoption, and like everybody's pressure testing these solutions, both out in the open public and then also in organizations. This is like the social media era where, it was MySpace and Facebook and everything was on the rise, and we sort of didn't pay attention as a collective global community while it was happening, and then it just sort of happened to us without the testing and adoption and risk mitigation and critical thinking. And I see this as very different because we are actively having hearings. We're actively looking at governance in private organizations and public organizations. The community and the public are talking about AI. So I think this really is a great opportunity for people to engage in understanding the impact of these tools and work within their own organizations to figure out ethical, appropriate, and governed use of these tools to help people improve their day-to-day lives, and not just sort of let it happen because a SaaS platform decrees it so.
Absolutely. And I think, and something else that's so important to remember is this is not a one and done, right? To your point, EJ, about that sort of traditional change management approach. This is not a reveal and, a 3 to 5 year, or a piece of software you'll have for the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
This is something that will evolve and very rapidly over time. And so this is, it's sort of that new era. And it requires that new approach. But it is fun, right? It's fun to witness. It's fun to be a part of. I'm glad that we got to dig into it today. I think, for those listeners that want to read our piece, the thought leadership piece that sort of, talks about some of the strategies that we outlined today, you can go to westmonroe.com/BYOAI to read the piece. That's a very quick way to get there. So please do go read that. Otherwise, I think we are probably at a wrap for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you, EJ and Sam, for your time and your expertise. I'm certain we will see you back here at some point. How can listeners get in touch with you if they'd like to reach out?
Yeah, you can always reach out to West Monroe if you want to figure out just general business inquiries. But hey, ejohnson@westmonroe.com. I'd love to talk about AI with you and your organization and maybe make some magic together.
Yep.
Sam?
Same thing. svogel@westmonroe.com. VOGEL.
Sounds great.
It's been a delight having us on the show. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thanks for listening to This is Digital. If you enjoyed today's show, please follow or subscribe on your preferred podcast app. And don't forget to leave us a review. For more information on This is Digital, visit westmonroe.com/thisisdigital.